सोसाइटी ठीक करो, डिस्क्रिमिनेशन ठीक करो, inequality ठीक करो, institutional prejudice. And thanks to the brilliance of RSS and BJP, we now have the question of reservation. I'm really disturbed by the emergence of Reservation Hatao campaign around a student movement that began with the question of fairness and accountability. ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ತಲುಪೋ ಉದ್ದೇಶದಿಂದ ನಾನು ಏನು ಹೇಳಬೇಕು ಅದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಇಂಗ್ಲೀಷಲ್ಲಿ ಬರ್ಕೊಂಬಂದ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀನಿ, ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ಕ್ಷಮಿಸಿ. ಇಂಗ್ಲೀಷ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳಿ ಹೋಗ್ತೀನಿ ಅದನ್ನು. Allama Prabhu, the 12th century Kannada mystic, philosopher and one of the foremost voices of the Vachana movement, said, Bariya Marevaya Praudhikeyali Kettaraya. We are lost in the arrogance of mere forgetting. Allama was speaking in a very different philosophical context. But for me today, the line has a contemporary resonance. We cannot build future by forgetting the past that brought us here. I chose to begin with these lines because I've been thinking a lot about the human nature of subconscious memory and conscious forgetting while watching this Gen Z movement unfold. Let me first say who I am. I'm an actor by profession. I'm not a politician. I can't call myself even a social activist. I don't claim to represent the Gen Z, nor do I claim to have all the answers. But I am here today simply as an aware citizen of the land, trying to question myself, perhaps all of us, in a hope that we can create a better world. And before I get into those questions that are bothering me, I want to congratulate you all on your resilience, effort, strength that led to the success of the NEET movement. I'm really proud that you held the focus till the end. You gave us all hope in times of despair. I really mean it. And here are some of those questions that have been bothering me. I actually joined this movement a little late. I was a bit skeptical. And I've been asking myself why. The honest answer is, I saw that within the movement, there was a resistance to memory, at least on the outlook. I wanted to participate in the anger over the paper leak. I wanted to stand with the students whose years of preparation, money, dreams, futures were being put at risk by a failing system. But I also felt that there was an uncomfortable tendency to avoid mentioning a particular name, a particular issue, a particular person, a particular incident, a certain part of history, trying hard to keep the movement restricted only to paper leak. I understood the practical argument. I even understood the fear behind it. Because when a movement becomes very large and threatens the establishment, there is always a danger that the establishment will try and divide it. But I began to wonder, if we deliberately erase parts of our memory in order to make a movement large, what exactly are we building? Are we building something without a foundation? I understand that a large movement naturally wants to become acceptable to everyone. It wants to sound practical. It wants to be inclusive and tries to become the voice of a vast majority. That is understandable. But there is the danger. Sometimes in the desire to become a voice of the majority, we begin removing everything that might make someone uncomfortable. For example, there was an objection to taking the names of Umar Khalid and Sharjeel Imam. There was an objection to the word the chant Azadi. I understand why people may say, why bring these names into a student movement about educational reforms. But I want to ask a different question. Why should remembering a student or chanting a slogan or a political voice which fought the same system or an incident become a threat to the unity of the student movement? If our idea of unity requires us to forget certain people, certain communities, certain histories, then perhaps we need to examine what kind of unity we are creating. For example, I completely support the School Theek Karo campaign. I want to make it absolutely clear that I am completely with it. Our government schools don't have proper toilets, proper classrooms, laboratories, libraries, drinking water, and even the basic amenities. That must be addressed. But I would ask one additional thing. Give the campaign a memory. Because a student is not only a student. Every student enters the classroom carrying a social history. He or she may carry a caste identity, a religious identity, a gender identity, an economic identity, a religious identity, a history of privilege, or a history of discrimination. We have not abolished caste. We have not abolished religious discrimination. We have not abolished patriarchy or economic inequality. So when we say a student is only a student, we may be saying something beautiful as an aspiration. But we cannot pretend that it is already our social reality. If a Dalit child and a privileged upper caste child walk into the same classroom, they may occupy the same bench, but they do not necessarily arrive there carrying the same social history. It is the same with Muslim and a Hindu child or a Christian child. If a girl and a boy enter the same classroom, they may receive the same textbook, but they do not necessarily experience the same world. So yes, School Theek Karo is good, but let's also ask, society Theek Karo. Discrimination Theek Karo. Inequality Theek Karo. Institutional prejudice Theek Karo. And thanks to the brilliance of RSS and BJP, we now have the question of reservation. I'm really disturbed by the emergence of Reservation Hatao campaign around a student movement that began with the question of fairness and accountability. We know how movements are broken. When a movement becomes powerful, you don't always have to attack it directly. Sometimes you change the subject. You introduce a new fault line. You make one group feel that the other group is taking away something from you. You turn the student versus system into student versus student. You turn accountability into caste versus caste. You turn a common struggle into competing identities. And suddenly the original question disappears. History is full of movements being divided by introducing new conflicts into an existing struggle. A lesson from history is simple. If you know what tools can be used to divide you, those tools become less powerful. Ignoring them does not protect a movement. Knowing them does. A movement must be flexible. If the focus changes, our strategy must change. If new issues emerge, we must address them. We must change strategy, but not lose memory. Because memory gives us perspective. Without memory, every issue becomes an isolated incident. A paper leak becomes only a paper leak. A student being arrested becomes only an individual case. A caste atrocity becomes only an individual tragedy. A communal attack becomes only a law and order problem. A war becomes only a geopolitical event. And eventually, we lose connections with them. We call this Samskritika Smruti Sanchaya. We call this Samskritika Smruti Sanchaya in Kannada. An accumulation of social and political memory, which we cannot afford to forget. We have a beautiful example in our own history. The Sharana movement, the Vachana movement, which gives us an extraordinary example. The Vachanas did not simply speak about spirituality. It was a spiritual movement, but it did not just speak about spirituality. They questioned caste. They questioned hierarchy. They questioned rituals. They questioned the authority of inherited privilege. They brought people from different social locations into a common intellectual and spiritual space. And perhaps most importantly, they came with a memory and created a memory for us. Those voices survived because people remembered them and the memories they brought with them. The Vachanas became a kind of social archive for us, a record of people questioning the structures of their time. So when we talk about creating a new India, why should we be afraid of creating a new memory using the old memories? We cannot look at the problems in isolation. This is where I personally want to draw the line. I don't think we can say, today we are fighting paper leaks, so we don't want to talk about caste. Today we are fixing schools, so we don't want to talk about religion. Today we are talking about unemployment, so we don't want to talk about gender discrimination. Today we want to build a broad movement, so let's not mention Umar Khalid or Rohit Vemula, the children and civilians of Gaza, the victims of war in Ukraine, the innocent people caught in the conflicts and violence across the world, or anyone whom the system has failed. We may not be able to solve every one of those problems, but we must retain the capacity to remember them. Because the moment we decide that somebody else's suffering is inconvenient to our movement, we have already begun compromising on the values that brought us into this movement. So how do we fight this divide? Not by pretending that differences don't exist, but by acknowledging them. The Sharana tradition did not create unity by saying everybody had same social experience. It created a space where people could question hierarchy and speak across it. That is a much more difficult form of unity. I'm really proud that you guys have achieved that difficult form of unity. Thanks to Neha to have taken that difficult route. And this is what this generation needs. Not that we are all the same, but we are different, and yet we will not allow those differences to be used to destroy our common struggle. That to me is a much stronger idea of solidarity. Memory is not about living in the past. Memory is what prevents us from repeating the past. And finally, I want to return to Ambedkar. He said, they cannot make history who forget history. I think that is perhaps the most important warning for this movement. Gen Z is on the march. It has energy, it has numbers, it has technology, it has the courage. But if it wants to create history, it must carry history with it. not selectively, not conveniently. Not only the history that makes us comfortable, all of it. Because a movement that remembers only what helps it win may win a battle. But a movement that remembers the struggles, injustices, and mistakes that brought it here can change the history. Inqilab Zindabad.
ಮತ್ತಷ್ಟು ವಿಶೇಷ ವಿಡಿಯೋಗಳನ್ನು ನೋಡಲು ಮತ್ತು ಹೊಸ ವಿಡಿಯೋಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ತಿಳಿಯಲು
eedina.com ಯೂಟ್ಯೂಬ್ ಚಾನೆಲ್ ಸಬ್ಸ್ಕ್ರೈಬ್ ಮಾಡಿ
ಮತ್ತು ಬೆಲ್ ಐಕಾನ್ ಕ್ಲಿಕ್ ಮಾಡಿ.